it's Lindsay. Welcome back to The Wandering Reader. Today we're going to be doing my November wrap up. I read 10 books in November, which I was really happy with, and so let's just jump into what I read. So the first book that I finished in November was Twas the Nightshift Before Christmas, and this is by Adam Kay. This is the follow-up to his book This Is Going to Hurt, which I did a review of on my channel last year, I think. I will leave it linked up in the cards. This is basically excerpts from his diaries that he wrote when he was a junior doctor and sort of training to be a doctor, but around Christmas time. So there are excerpts from all of the diaries from the years that he was training and the different things that happened to him. This was just as delightful as his original book. It's obviously very, very short. It's a lot shorter and it's a lot smaller than his other book. So there's less in here, so I maybe say that my enjoyment factor was slightly less. But I did still really enjoy this and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Next up for non-fiction November, although 'Twas the Nightshift Before Christmas could also go for non-fiction November, is Period by Emma Barnett. This is basically a book all about periods and it explores different things to do with periods. So the chapter headings in here are things like fresh blood, first blood, holy blood, bad blood, man blood, office blood, classroom blood, political blood, and it just talks about periods in lots of different facets. So, you know, what it's like to get your period for the first time, you know, how you can deal or how people or people's experiences of dealing with periods when they're at work and at school, and the sort of political ideas behind periods, the science behind periods, the research behind periods, all of this kind of stuff. And I think the main thing that she was arguing in here is that we just need to be a lot more open about our periods, basically, that we hide behind a lot of these euphemisms that are on the front cover here, you know, rather than just coming out and saying I'm on my period, or, you know, I'm feeling really rough today because I've got tummy cramps because I'm on my period, or whatever it might be, you know. And I think she was arguing that she wanted people to highlight it a lot more so that there isn't this, so we're not hiding basically away from people. And I learned a lot of really interesting things in here that I didn't know before. And it did make me think about, she talked quite a lot in here about how there's not been an awful lot of research into some of the conditions associated with women's menstrual cycles, because medicine in years gone past has been a very male dominated field, and obviously periods don't affect men, and so therefore there is less there has been less sort of like highlighting of these conditions because of that, you know, conditions that could probably have been solved quite easily if we had sort of paid much more attention to them in the past. So I really did enjoy this. I on the most part I liked her voice. There were a few occasions during here where I did find her a little bit irritating and the writing to be a little bit not as on point as other points, but I did really enjoy this, and again I ended up giving this 4 stars. Next up, I read a book that one of you guys picked for me, which is 10 Tiny Breaths by K.A. Tucker, and I'm so glad I did. This basically tells the story of Casey, and I think 10 or 15 years ago, oh no, hold on, 4 years ago, she had something horrific happen in her life. So she was in the car when her parents had a car accident, and the car accident killed both of her parents, and it also killed her best friend and her boyfriend that were in the car with her at the time. So she was the only survivor of the car accident. And obviously this was a very, very traumatic. 4 years later, she's still not over it. She gets these sort of like really bad nightmares, and she's really defensive and won't let anybody in and things like that. She's taking care of her little sister. They're living with their aunt and uncle at the beginning of the book, but at the very beginning of the book they run away from their aunt and uncle to LA, I think it is, because her uncle, there were some suggestions that he might want to abuse the younger sister, so they've run away. They've rented this apartment in LA to start all over again, basically. And Casey meets, yeah, Casey meets Trent, who has an apartment in the same complex, and she also meets a woman whose name I can't remember. She has this really lovely next door neighbour as well who's got a daughter, and it's partly to do with this relationship that she has with Trent, but it's also to do with her sort of finally trying to deal with what happened 4 years ago. And I thought this was absolutely brilliant. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did, but I thought it was fantastic. There are more books in this series. This is an ongoing, well, I say an ongoing series. It's a series that's got sort of like more than 4 books in it, I think, and I definitely want to continue on in the series. I don't know whether we're going to be following different characters, or, you know, I mean, probably, I mean, maybe we're going to get a story from her little sister's point of view. I don't really know, but yeah, I just found this really engrossing, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. Next up, I read a review copy of Leave Me Breathless by Jodi Ellen Malpas, and this was published on the 5th of November by Orion, and I was kindly sent a copy from the publisher through NetGalley, so thank you very much to them for sending it to me. And this basically is a contemporary romance book with sort of like a suspense twist, so you might call it romantic suspense. I'm not really sure what category you would put it in. Yeah, maybe romantic suspense. So this basically tells the story of Ryan and Hannah. Ryan is sort of like an ex-security agent, and he's decided to take a break from his job and to go and spend some time in the village where his daughter is, and he's also got a house there and things like that. And Hannah has just opened an art store in the same village. She just recently moved into the area, and the two of them meet when he runs her over on her bicycle, and yeah, obviously things go from there. But Hannah has got a past. You know, she's moved to this village to sort of get away from something that's happened in her past, and you find out more and more about that as the book goes on. And this was my first Jodi Ellen Malpas book. I'd heard about her writing before on the Wicked Wallflowers Club podcast, and so I was intrigued to read something by her, and I will be definitely diving into her back catalogue because I really enjoyed this. I thought it was sexy, I thought it was an interesting plot, really well developed characters, and it just kept me engaged the whole time, and I read it really quickly. It was a longer book, so I think it was over 400 pages. Let me just double check. Okay, it was just under 400 pages, so sort of on the longer side for contemporary romance, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. And that's another one that I ended up giving 4.5 stars. Next up, I reread Saga Volume 1, and this is by Brian K. Vaughn and Fiona Staples. I'm not really one to read an awful lot of graphic novels. You guys know that if you've been watching my channel for a while. But I got a free trial of Kindle Unlimited. One day they did this deal where you could have Kindle Unlimited for free for 3 months. So I jumped on it. And I was sort of having a browse through what sort of things were in their catalogue, because I knew they had a lot of romance that I wanted to read, but what I didn't realise was that they had a lot of graphic novels too, and I could read the whole of the Saga series for free basically. So I reread Saga Volume 1. I read this a couple of years ago at the very start of my channel. I remember doing a try a chapter tag from like 3 different graphic novels that I had, this was one of the ones that I read all the way through, and this is basically a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but it's set in space. It's like a sci-fi retelling. So you've got this man and this woman, I can't remember their names, but they come from 2 different planets that are sort of warring against each other, and before the first volume starts, they've got together and she's pregnant, and at the very beginning of the graphic novel she gives birth to their baby. And it's about them trying to survive, but then it's about other things in this world as well. And I just found it really funny. I quite like the art style. I mean, I'm not in love with it or anything like that, but it reminded me of why I liked it the first time around, definitely. And I'm looking forward to continuing on in the series, and I gave that 4 stars. Next up for the Buzzwordathon, I read She's the One by Ella Goode. This is book number 4 in the Castile family series, and this basically follows Maisie and Star. And they go to the same college, I think, or are they in their last year of high school? I think they're in college. And Maisie has never been interested in boys, or, you know, has never found a boy that she's interested enough to go out with. And she thinks she just hasn't found the right one, basically. And then one day Star gets her attention, and I think Maisie quickly realises that it's because she likes girls rather than boys, and it's about the relationship between the two of them. This was only a novella, so I think it was less than 100 pages. And I liked it for what it was. It was a good story, there were good characters, you know, there was some good heat between them and that sort of idea. I liked it, but it wasn't obviously fully developed or anything like that. So as novellas never are, but sometimes, you know, they can be a bit more fully developed than others. But this one, not so much. There are sort of like other books in this series which I'll have a look at, no doubt. I think I can get them on Kindle Unlimited as well. So in the end I ended up giving that one 3.5 stars. Then I read Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan, which is book number 1 in the Hoops series. And this was one that I'd been wanting to read for a while. Again, I listened to an episode of the Wicked Wallflowers Club podcast where Kennedy Ryan was on, and she was talking in particular about this book. It had just come out, the episode that I was listening to. She talked about her inspiration behind the book. So basically, this is a book about Iris, who is in a relationship with, oh God, I'm so terrible with names. Yeah, I can't remember anyway, and I can't find it, but she's in a relationship with this man who is an upcoming NBA star, and but she's in a bar one night and she's watching basketball and sort of having a drink on her own, and August is also in the bar, who is also sort of like a rookie NBA player. And he spots her, and they strike up a conversation, and you know, they hit it off really well during the evening, and at the end of the evening he wants to take things further, and she realises that, and then she tells him, I'm really sorry, but I've got a boyfriend. And he's obviously really upset by it and things like that, but has to move on. And then they have a couple of other encounters, because obviously both him and Iris's boyfriend are playing for their NBA, so they're bound to bump into each other. And each time he sees her, you know, there's that spark there, and you know, he's gutted that she's with this other guy. And in the meantime, Iris is pregnant. She's had their baby. She didn't want to be pregnant, you know, she wanted this career on her own and things like that, but she's bringing up this baby, and gets herself into a situation where, well, I say she gets herself, that's not true. She finds herself in this situation where she's in an abusive relationship, and it's about that, and then it's about her breaking free of that and things like that. And this was one of the most upsetting books I've ever read, like where I was reading this and sort of audibly gasping, and I think I woke my husband up a couple of times when I was reading this, because I was just so shocked by some of the things that had happened in there and the way that Kennedy described them. And but rightly, because she took a lot of inspiration from a lot of women that she interviewed who had been in abusive relationships that were similar and obviously different from Iris's. And yeah, and so a lot of what you were reading about felt like it was so true, because obviously it was based on those experiences. And I just, yeah, it was compelling from that sort of point of view, and really upsetting from that point of view. But then also Iris and August's relationship was also very, very compelling. And I just found the whole thing, I don't even know if I can find the word, but it was just utterly brilliant. And I would highly recommend it. I do think you have to be in the right frame of mind. It's not your bog standard contemporary romance. You have to know going in that there are some things that are going to be difficult to read about, but I think it's a book that everybody should read, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I gave it 5 stars. Then on audio I listened to Believe, Boxing Olympics and My Life Outside the Ring by Nicola Adams, and this is Nicola Adams' autobiography. In case you're not aware, Nicola Adams is a boxer in the UK. She's a professional boxer, or she's just retired actually from professional boxing, and she was an Olympic boxer, and she was the first woman to win an Olympic gold medal in her boxing class, which I think is flyweight off the top of my head. I could be wrong about that. Yeah, because in the 2012 Olympics was the first time that women's boxing was an Olympic sport. And she talked about her experience of winning the gold medal and the lead up to the London Olympics, and then she also competed in the Rio Olympics. She talked about growing up and how she got into boxing and different things about her life like that, and I enjoyed it for what it was. She's in her 30s, I think she's a very similar age to me, sort of like middle 30s, and I do feel like at times that there wasn't a lot of substance to what she was talking about. I don't know, it just seemed a little bit childish and immature. You know, some of the things that she'd mentioned to do with growing up and things like that, and I suppose that's because she's had these massively great things happen to her and she's achieved such wonderful things, but at the same time she's like only in her middle 30s. So yeah, I thought it was okay for what it was. I didn't like the writing of it. It wasn't well written in my opinion. There was a lot of repetition of vocabulary and things like that, and I really noticed that because I listened to it on audio as well, so if you're hearing the word over and over again it's just more obvious. But so I don't know, and it was okay. If you're interested in her as a person, then I would pick it up, and in the end I gave that 2.5 stars. And then I finally finished 13 Reasons Why by J. Asher. This was a book that I'd originally picked up for the Contemporary-a-thon, which was it in September? I think it was in September. And I got about 60% of the way through it and then sort of put it down to focus on other things. So I decided to pick it back up again. So what I really want to do is get rid of, by the end of the year, get rid of all of the books on my currently reading shelf on Goodreads. And this was one of them that was obviously hanging around. And I thought it was perfect to read because also, you know, for the Buzzwordathon it had the number 13 in the title. And this is basically a story about a girl called Hannah who killed herself, and you know from the very beginning of the book that she committed suicide, and she sent everybody, well not every, so, and she sent a group of people tapes of her explaining sort of her reasons for killing herself. And we're following the perspective of Clay, and Clay is the one that's listening to these tapes at this particular moment in time. They've been mailed from one person to the other, and he happens to be the one that is listening to them next. And so we're following his perspective as he's listening. He's walking around the town that they live in, and because there's a map that's been included with the tapes, and sort of going to the different places that she's describing and things like that. And then we're also hearing obviously Hannah's voice through the tapes as well. So it's Clay's narrative, Hannah's voice on the tapes. I didn't really know how to feel about this. I liked the narrative style, but I was a bit confused as to what the message of the book was. Yeah, I don't know. And I remember there being quite a lot of controversy around the fact that the Netflix show had come out, and you know there was a lot of talk about, you know, this is, you know, troublesome for teenagers to watch and things like that. And yeah, I'm a bit on the fence as to what I think about it. I'm not really sure. You know, it packs a real emotional punch. I really felt like J. Asher got that across in his writing. Like I said, I like the narrative style. But yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure on that one. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it, but yeah, I don't know. And then the last book that I read in November was 100 Reasons by Kelly Collins. This is the first book in the Aspen Cove series, and this was another one that I read for the Buzzwordathon. And this tells the story of Sage and Cannon. Sage has just recently, or you see her drive into Aspen Cove after she is given this property by somebody that she cared for in her job as a nurse, and she's just been sort of like put on almost like gardening leave from her job because sort of like her concentration wasn't 100% there when she'd learned that this woman had died. So she drives to this city. She meets another girl another woman I should say, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, who's been given the local bakery in this woman's will as well. And yeah, so there's a friendship between the two of those, which was really nice. And then she meets Cannon, and the way that she meets him is his house is next to this property that she owns, which happens to be a bed and breakfast. And she pulls up to the driveway, and this older man gets out of the car and ends up punching her. And I can't remember how the punching came about, but anyway, Cannon was there with his, it happens to be his dad. Cannon was there with his dad. He's not very courteous about what happened, and that's how they meet. But then it's obviously about the relationship between the two of them. So it's the first Kelly Collins book that I'd read. I really liked it. I think it was good. You know, it's sort of like your bog standard contemporary romance. I like the Aspen Cove setting. I like the sort of like the small town vibe that was going on there. I liked the story, the sideline story about the bakery and the woman that ran the bakery, and every day there would be new ingredients that turned up at the door so she could sort of start learning how to make different things in this bakery, and I thought that was really, really sweet. I'm hoping we're going to get a story from her. I think we are. I think she's next up in the series. So yeah, really enjoyed it actually, and I ended up giving that one 3.5 stars. So there you go guys, they were all of the books that I read in November. I'd love to have a chat with you in the comments below. Have you read any of these books? What did you think of them? And then what books did you read and really enjoy in November? If you like this video guys, then please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below for more bookish content from me. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.